Well, baby, you've been on my mind. I think about you all the time. Oh, I want to see your face. That don't make me wait.
All right, welcome back to Sleeping Around, the podcast with Dr. Ann and Matthew.
I was trying to match our guest because she looks so spectacular.
Oh, my goodness.
She looks so spectacular. And she told me she was going to wear gold. So I was like, I have to try and match.
Well, I'm
Thank you.
going to tell you, we've never had, I've never been more excited about a guest. We've had musicians, we've had CEOs, we've had doctors. This one hits home for many reasons.
Without further ado,
That's pretty big
drum roll.
build-up.
So this is Rachel, who's from Dallas. And Rachel and I met on social media about 2 weeks ago. Brand new. About 2 years ago, actually.
Right.
And that was actually when I had my first foray into TikTok to really kind of go, okay, I'm going to throw my hat in a ring and really try to spread education messages. And so my initial information really was surrounding narcolepsy. And so Rachel is a person who lives with narcolepsy and she kicks ass, right? She
Yes,
kicks
she
ass
does.
in life. She kicks narcolepsy's ass. But she had connected with me and she really is always doing these incredible messages so that people can really put a face to what is the experience of a person living with narcolepsy. You fast forward to 2023 and although she lives in Texas and I am in Pennsylvania, she and her father had flew out to establish care with me in Scranton or South Wilkes-Barre is where my one of my practices are. And I have the privilege now of being her care provider as well for the treatment of her narcolepsy.
Thank you. That means so much to me.
Well, it means a tremendous amount to me that you're willing to come on here and share, continue to share your message because, I mean, you have done a tremendous job.
Thank you.
Everything from being one of the initial rising voices for Project Sleep.
Second generation, yeah.
Yeah. And then utilizing a variety of different ways of culture like music
Yes.
to be able to educate others. So tell us a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
I've lived in Dallas all my life. I grew up in Duncanville, Texas, and I do have type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy. I was diagnosed first in 2002. Yeah, it was like, but I started onsetting the summer before with the EDS, and then when 9/11 happened, that's when I started getting sleep paralysis every night, almost all night. And I'm like, I was a psychology major, so I knew about like looking up things in narcolepsies in the DSM to differentiate it. So I came to the conclusion with my grandma, like it has to be narcolepsy. So I knew I had narcolepsy before. Are you familiar with Dr. Gregory Foster? He is the lead physician who initially diagnosed me, and for 17 years, he referred me, and I went to Dr. Philip M. Becker, who has been a rock star, and he took such good care of me. I was so sad when he retired, and I'm just so pleased that I have a doctor now that really cares about patients' quality of life, and that hey, yeah, we're not just like, I'm not just sleepy. That's just part of it.
Right.
That's just part of me. But I think it's developed my character a lot.
Sure.
Well, I think, let's back up just a little bit. So, and I will never ask a woman's age, but you seem to be dealing with this since you said 2001, 2002.
Oh, yeah. I'm 43.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. You look very good for 43.
Yeah.
So I'm not that strong in math, but were you dealing with stuff even before 2002, 2001?
It was,
but nobody kind of knew about it.
I was fortunate in that the EDS started when I started my first part-time job in college.
Okay.
And that's when the EDS and sleep attacks started.
Okay.
every year I would, like you guys talked about the rats. I took care of the rats at Texas Women's University. That was my first job.
Right.
And I started having automatic behavior and falling off the stool asleep during break time at lunch.
Wow.
And I started getting in trouble, and they were worried about me because when you're dealing with the rats and it's an experiment, I know all about that. I was going to be a psychologist, so I know about internal validity, external validity, all the invalidities. And, yeah.
All the validities.
Yeah. And I remember I was like, I don't think I can have a control group good enough. And my professor's like, Rachel, it's just fine. But yeah, I even did my research paper in that class was about how music affects memory, different genres of music, because you hear about the classical music.
Sure.
But I found that rock music tended to be the least it was the least performing part. But it was an amazing experience. I have been dealing with I was diagnosed pretty early on.
Yeah.
I knew and it was it started at I would say it started around July 2001.
Okay.
That's when the EDS started. But because of 9/11, I know it was 9/11. It triggered my body to kill all the rest of the hypocretin cells, because it was 2 days after 9/11. I kept on having those nightmares, and it was almost all night, every night. I don't think anybody. I wish I could just touch someone and let them experience the experience, because a lot of times as patients, we feel absolutely worthless.
Yep.
And it's hard to. You have to find ways to humanize yourself and be relatable. And
Sure.
I take great pride in spreading awareness to people without narcolepsy. How many people are not diagnosed?
Sure.
So many.
Rachel, I think here's something cool, because we found we had some common themes in social media, but I too wanted to be a psychologist. And I too, my undergrad was in psychology, and I also worked with rats.
That's awesome.
One of the things I want to commend you on is you can already tell you're so well read and knowledge, because you've lived this. One of the things that a message that I think is really important to anyone listening to us, and Ann always talks about this, is that patient's journey and listening to that patient. And what you said just then was that if someone could touch me, and there's a movie where if I touch, then I could feel exactly what you're feeling. I could see your journey. And so now it sounds like you advocate speaking to that specifically.
That's why I use transformative analogies and words in music to actually describe what narcolepsy is like. I think I did. I don't know if you can cuss, but I was wrote my first song was Whack Ass Dreams.
Oh,
and it is a parody of the WAP song.
Yeah.
It's I'm a certified freak when it comes to sleep. That's all narcolepsy makes you sleep like a week. Yeah. That
You
was
are
how
my
I got
favorite.
into music.
Yeah. So the WAP means wet ass pussy. So I think you're allowed to cuss on this podcast. So, yeah. I think you're allowed
And
to.
and what does that mean? I'm just kidding, Matthew.
Don't ask, don't tell. Man.
Exactly. But
Dad, tell us more about the grinder.
It's been working great.
Awesome.
I mean, Dan's lost a lot of weight, but it looks. Oh, you were talking about me.
Yeah.
I am fascinated, though. So the earlier years, even before you had that, sound like the onset really happened after 9/11.
Yeah, it did. That's when it's I do. You are aware that the symptoms you can get the EDS, and there's if you can get treatment soon enough, or there's any possible way to reduce the likelihood. It's people will eventually get the other auxiliary symptoms later.
Rachel, can you explain to our audience, and I'll bet you $1 right now, Dan doesn't know. He probably thinks it means erectile dysfunction. What does EDS mean? What does that stand for?
Excessive daytime sleepiness.
Okay. And so whenever we talk about that, Ann has taught me something pretty cool. My whole focus, and you kind of learned a little bit about my journey, was about the nighttime. And what are we doing at night? Why can't we sleep at night? But this is so important that I want to make sure that anyone listening or watching this understands that EDS is huge. And so your onset truly started happening after that event, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
The sleep paralysis, but the EDS did start in June.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was just something about living in. I had prophetic dreams of Twin Towers collapsing
Right.
when I lived in the dormitory, and then it happened in New York. So I saw my dorm all the time, and I'm guessing psychologically it triggered it. At first, a lot of people didn't believe me that you must have gotten a virus or something. I am aware that I do have both of the genes. I have pretty low. Is it hypercretin? Pretty low. It's like at 50.
Okay.
And yours was less. Yours was less than 50. It was undetectable.
What should it be at, Ann?
Yeah. So most typically when we're talking about looking at orexin or hypocretin, it's the same neurotransmitter or brain cell signaler that really has a primary responsibility of promoting wakefulness. However, we've learned now it has so many roles throughout the body. Now, when looking at that, individuals who have narcolepsy type 1 or narcolepsy with cataplexy typically have less than what we call 200 picograms per ml. So it's a specific measurement. Most people without narcolepsy, we generally are seeing that their levels around 400, 500. And again, it probably oscillates across the day because there's other things that can promote it coming out. However, for individuals, again, who have narcolepsy with cataplexy, it's not uncommon for it to be undetectable, meaning that there's none, or that it's just reduced less than 200. Now, one of the things that is really striking about what Rachel describes in her journey is that, yes, there was excessive daytime sleepiness. She also, and excessive daytime sleepiness can have so many faces. It can be, as you were describing, the sleep attacks. I'm sitting here and I'm just struggling to stay awake and I just need to doze off for a few minutes. But there also can be other manifestations like automatic behavior, which she describes, which is really this hybrid of a microsleep and wakeful behavior, almost similar to what we see with parasomnias, like sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep eating. So when she's describing how that impacted her in a research realm, what can happen is it can look like I'm completely awake doing things, but I'm doing the opposite because I've gotten so used to, okay, this is how I feed the rats and this is how I change this, blah, 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 that she could start potentially contaminating her own experiments by, I was supposed to do with this the controls, but now I'm doing it with the research, the research arm. So the thing that I would say that most people who are watching this could probably relate to is it's that I'm driving and then, oh shit, how did I get here? Right? Or I just missed the exit and it was because you're on autopilot. And so that's really what automatic behavior is. Now, when you look at the timeline that she described, it's actually a very common story you hear of the onset of the symptoms being in the spring, summer months. Really? And you can see a progression of the symptoms over the course of the first 2 years. And so part of that is really trying to understand, is it the ongoing destruction of the orexin hypocretin neurons? Because we only have about 70 to 100,000 of them in our lateral hypothalamus. And so once they're injured or gone, there's no bringing them back at this point. And really? So with that stated, the part of the reason that we think that we see this kind of timeline, this temporal change over time, is that many people will have some sort of provoking factor that leads to a likely autoimmune response. So your body recognizing self as foreign. And that very commonly is strep throat, influenza, one of these illnesses. So we generally are seeing that there's the illness in the fall, winter month, and then we see the onset of symptoms in the spring, summer months. And then many times we don't necessarily see that there's this ongoing progression over the course of months to usually within 2 years. And so then we can see the accumulation of other symptoms like sleep paralysis. That's where as I'm falling asleep or waking up, I'm frozen or stuck. I feel like I can't move, but my brain is awake. My eyes are like, I know I'm awake, but I can't move. Sleep-related hallucinations. I can see things, hear things, feel things that aren't really there as I'm falling asleep or waking up. Disturbed nocturnal sleep. having very fragmented nocturnal sleep. So many people, this will get mistaken as insomnia. People who have insomnia typically aren't sleepy during the day.
Right.
They generally are more hypervigilant, alert. They might feel fatigued, run down, but they're not sleepy. And then finally, cataplexy. And cataplexy can be these episodes of transient loss of tone or weakness that can involve parts of the body or the whole body. So full collapse to the ground or slurred speech, dropping things from my hands, my head drop. We know also that in children, in adolescents, and those with a new onset or abrupt onset, we can also see a positive motor phenomena. And so that can be, I get eyebrow raising, my tongue sticks out of my mouth. I can even have abnormal movement.
I was going to say, don't some also have like a tick?
So that is a more uncommon phenotype, but that can occur, and we generally see that in children. And so with that stated, the descriptions of what Rachel has experienced is very much in line with what we commonly can see in people who have narcolepsy. And so some of the things around the sleep paralysis and also the very vivid dreaming, people who have narcolepsy have a dysfunction specifically with REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. A lot of people mistaken this as this is our deepest stage of sleep. It is not our deepest stage of sleep. Slow wave sleep or non-REM 3 sleep is our deepest stage of sleep.
Yep.
REM sleep, however, people think it's our deepest stage of sleep because we experience REM atonia, where we can't move or frozen in stuck, which explains the cataplexy, which explains the sleep paralysis. But it's also our period of time where we have very, very vivid dreaming. It's like watching a movie. And so that also explains why people can have sleep paralysis, these very vivid dreams, recurrent nightmare disorder. So for her to describe, I had this imagery, this prodrome of like, this is what's going to happen in that, and then continuing to see that. That is unfortunately something that can very commonly occur for people with narcolepsy.
Gotcha.
Well, I have a story.
Come on.
All right. Well, I was 2002. I was titrating impairments at the time, but I was laughing with my sister and my brother-in-law, and I went into like severe cataplexy. I just like crumbled on the couch for 30 minutes. And I couldn't move. And my father, he couldn't believe that I could hear during cataplexy. He thought it was just a sleep attack. And so he said, Rachel, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, the secret word is pomegranate. Oh, and I did finally been able to move. It's like, Dad, the secret word is forbidden fruit.
That's all what you just did. So, this is so awesome. And I'm serious. So for our listeners, so when you're in that state, you could still hear everything that's going on around you.
Yeah, you got to be careful. That's how Harriet Tubman, I believe, she had narcolepsy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes she would just feign her sleep attacks, whereas in cataplexy, because all of the slave masters just thought she was sleeping. But she
was listening to, so that is,
Yeah.
I did not know that, Rachel.
Yeah.
So you just taught me something. So, and it goes back what you were just saying. So even though the body, right, we're kind of out, you can hear everything around. Wow.
So it's purely an atonia. It's not a sleep attack. So some people who have narcolepsy with cataplexy, when they have a cataplexy event and a generalized one where they have the full collapse to the ground, they can have a sleep attack after or with it.
Okay.
And
it happens a lot.
Yeah, and part of that is because when people do have cataplexy and with their narcolepsy is when they're more sleepy, it actually makes them more susceptible to experience a cataplexy attack.
Okay.
And so that's why you can potentially see that. However, one of the things as a physician, when I'm trying to educate other physicians or healthcare professionals, is saying to them, if you have someone who you think is having syncope, right? So syncope is the medical experience of that. A person actually faints, passes out. A person who has syncope, they have full collapse to the ground, but they are out. They can't respond to you. They can't recall. They'll tell you like, I feel like I see like the TV, the old time TVs that got like darker. And then the next thing I know, I'm on the ground. And the next thing I see is like people are around me. For people who have cataplexy, they're able to give you an entire recourse of everything.
Wow.
And many times people will be like, well, then they must be faking passing out because they're able to recall it.
Right.
And it's not that they're faking it. It's that it's a muscle tone loss, not a conscious state loss.
Wow.
Right.
You know, I was thinking about something, you know, when I was preparing to actually, you know, meet you and do the podcast. I'm curious, like with the sensory things that we talk about. So sensory deprivation and float labs. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you heard of like
Oh,
what a
of
float
course.
lab?
Yeah. Are you referring to how my sleep pattern is disordered?
I'm curious. I don't refer,
Okay.
but so I've done one of these. I love to experiment with different things, right? And so I often wondered what it would feel like to not have movement, to feel kind of floatless, lifeless, and just kind of. And one of my physician friends said that that could be a similar feeling to what patients go through, like just because it's hard to describe, but I couldn't feel anything because you're floating. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything because it was dark, but my mind would just
You
go
would
to these
see
places.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would have vivid visions. And it's not
Wow.
like when I did ayahuasca, but it was pretty darn and just that sensory deprivation. So when you go into something like this and you can hear, or you go into that state where you can't, and then you just kind of wake up, the only thing I think of is that, or when I've had surgery.
Sure.
Count down from 5, then I wake up and I've already had the surgery. Is that what that feeling? I don't know if you had surgery, but is that what that's like?
Is that what the narcolepsy?
Yeah, some episodes.
They're
Because I
they're a
really
lot-
want
they're a
our
lot
audience
worse.
to feel like,
But it feels like it's pretty much actually happening. Like with 9/11, I started having these nightmares of the buildings collapsing on us,
right?
and trying to get to the bomb shelter, and it was just, I could feel the pain of the fire. I could hear the bombs. I could see my legs, and I could see like my some of my family members, and my former husband. He's like, no, there's nothing there. There's no one here. And when I could quit, I'm working with the rats. I some of the experiments, I felt bad for the rats. So I had a hypnagogic hallucination nightmare that a rat that was sick was crawling up my leg, and it creeped me out. I was like, ah! And I really saw and felt a rat on me.
Wow. So it's real time happening.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot more vivid than the VR.
Sure.
I usually have horrible dreams.
Still?
Not on Xywav.
Okay.
Not on medication. I don't have it nearly as bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of unsafe to leave the house much without some kind of control of the atonia.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of the things that she's describing with the vividness is something that many times people may even be embarrassed to share because they're like, I'm having these very, very vivid visions, or I'm having these feelings. And so when you start talking about quote unquote hallucinations, what do people immediately think? Oh, she must have schizophrenia, or she has psychosis or something. So it immediately brings you down this path of psychiatric diagnoses. And some of the challenges when you even talk about that is that if you were to take the landscape of schizophrenia, where what are potential clinical characteristics that can look like? Well, not only having hallucinations, they can have catatonia, where they are more of a flattened affect, and they're going to have less likelihood of interactions. They can have sleepiness. And in fact, in some patients, if you were to do the testing that we use to diagnose narcolepsy, which is a overnight sleep test with a daytime sleep test, there can be what's called sleep onset REM periods for people who have schizophrenia. So it can look like this very messy tangle. Now, one of the other pieces that's really important is that when you're talking about the symptoms that she's experiencing, recognizing that the pentad symptoms of narcolepsy include excessive daytime sleepiness. It's the most sensitive symptom of narcolepsy, meaning 100% of patients who have narcolepsy have excessive daytime sleepiness. However, please don't mistake that with the fact that there's a lot of other things that can cause sleepiness. Now, when you look at the other symptoms, disturbed nocturnal sleep, having very frequent arousals, and very, if you were to look at the sleep architecture or how someone sleeps who has narcolepsy, it's a lot of mixing of sleep stages. It's not a very clear transition. So disturbed nocturnal sleep, the sleep-related hallucinations, the sleep paralysis, and then cataplexy. And cataplexy is the most specific symptom of narcolepsy, meaning that if I elicit a history of cataplexy, then that is narcolepsy until proven otherwise. Now, with all that stated, for people who have narcolepsy, like Rachel, we very frequently need to utilize a combination of therapies to help in relieving that experience. Now, one of the biggest failures in medicine is that when we look at the FDA and what they have approved drugs to treat narcolepsy, The only drugs that actually have an indication for narcolepsy as a diagnosis is actually the traditional stimulants like methylphenidate. However, if you look at all the other drugs that have been developed, they actually don't have an indication specifically for narcolepsy. Recognizing I just described all the symptoms, it's only for excessive daytime sleepiness or cataplexy. And so this now turns into this slippery slope of what do we treat in patients? We treat their sleepiness. But then you hear from someone like Rachel of that the burden of this disorder is far beyond sleepiness. Sleepiness is a major burden, but there's so much more there.
Yeah, it's emotionally traumatizing. When it's untreated, you just feel like a worthless heap. Like I didn't wear pretty dresses like this or put makeup on before Dr. Ann. But now I can be me again. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think 21 years of dealing, Dan.
I'm okay.
21 years of dealing with this. I can imagine you've you've probably tried everything.
A lot of almost everything, but I not some of the newer ones. The newest one I'm on is Wakix, and it just gives me that extra boost with the modafinil. I took 2 modafinils, and as soon as I wake up, you need to take the medication, or else you're gonna it's like being in between. It's like Inception meets Nightmare on Elm Street. I call it Nightmare on REM sleep. Right. That is what the experience is really like.
Right.
Yeah. If you don't know if you're in a dream or not, just like they in that movie. Yeah.
Rachel, you have no idea how much I appreciate you giving those descriptions. So as you guys know, I'm very active on social media, and very frequently one of the things I utilize that platform for, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, is really to call out insurances, right? And so most recently I had a call out on Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? And the reason I did this call out was because of the fact that, ironically, it wasn't even one of my patients, it's one of my colleagues' patients at University of Pennsylvania, but they had sent me this screenshot of a denial. Right. And the denial was, we refuse the approval of Wakix because your patient is also on either Sunosi or Xywav or Lumryz or Xyrem, et cetera.
They have no idea.
Exactly. So basically saying polypharmacy cannot be utilized for an individual to optimize their symptoms. So if you're an insurance company and you're listening to this, what I want you to hear is the words coming from a patient who is living with narcolepsy's mouth, that excessive daytime sleepiness is not the only thing that they need to treat, and that the burden of the disease reaches every aspect of their life, and that they physically cannot even leave the house and live a life that's worth living because of the burdens that you're imposing and you're denying and delaying and obstructing of healthcare. So again, my response to when people want to have my tax ID and have an email conversation, it's not a matter of the individual patient, it's a matter of the policy. Make sure we're revising policies with the patient in mind, because of the fact that Rachel is giving us a very clear description as to what the burden is and the impairment is, and that polypharmacy isn't the exception. It typically is the rule. And we need to be able to treat the person in front of us without you reducing the availability of what is actually going to make their days better.
Absolutely.
And I don't understand how Blue Cross Blue Shields is in the same Prime is also my manager for prescriptions, and why is it that they approve mine but not this girl's?
Yeah,
it's
Boy,
the
if
same,
I can answer that question, Rachel,
it's
I'd
the same thing, because I am on polypharmacy big time. And I just it's not a life worth living, and that was the best thing you said. It's really not. I couldn't be a wife or mom. All I could do is I would just stare at the ceiling and go in and out of hypnagogia, demons. And that was for a couple months. And you just feel that me and my parents lost a couple years off of our life.
yeah.
But I'm so thankful to Dr. Ann and you, Matt and Dan, for inviting me, because I do know, to me, I just really wanted, I felt real bad about myself. And when my ex-husband abandoned me, that's when I knew I couldn't be an Avon lady anymore. I was sleepy Avon lady.
Sleepy
I
Avon?
was pretty popular. I won some awards, but I can't drive. And when my ex-husband left me, I couldn't drive. And that's when I decided on Twitter to announce my divorce and change my username to Sleepy American.
Yeah.
And then the whole concept of like, you know what? In order to deal with this disorder, I really am a superhero because it takes so much determination to hold on
Yes.
and live. Because like
Yes.
it is a depressing thing.
Right.
It's all consuming. It's like when the Twin Towers went down, my life crashed all around.
Right.
And it's I don't think that there are enough people in sleep medicine or knowledgeable. I did see that I think it's the Sleep Apnea Foundation is giving out a $10,000 scholarship to people that want to go into sleep medicine. I think that's really helpful, and just like the common knowledge, it's a pleasure and a privilege to have a voice and to have a platform. And I just feel like I don't have the ability to write a book. I don't think I could stay awake. And honestly, my whole story is so long and harrowing that it probably would be not a fun read. But I sing songs about my life because they're shorter and they're in the media. I know there are movies, but it's just something that I can do. A lot of times I use singing to cope with the disorder. Like Narcolepsy, I wrote that during one of my darkest hours. Like I wrote that around right before the Mayo Clinic, where I went and Dr. Sivler re-diagnosed me, and I found out that he couldn't. He was just he wanted me to go back to my old doctor, and my old doctor is like,
Right.
I don't. So yeah, I wrote that song around then because it did feel like I've tried. I didn't just go. I did see Dr. Morris, and I was like, I want her as my doctor. I want her.
Tell us a
But-
little bit about that Sleepy American. So, I'm curious. I think I would love to follow you. So you said Twitter and these other, I think, for our audience.
TikTok, Instagram.
Yeah.
So follow it. And
Spotify.
is everything under Sleepy American?
Some of it's a nap cave on Instagram,
Okay.
but Sleepy American. I mean, on my music, I'm Rachel Nesmith because I think when you're representing a brand,
Right.
your face is the most important thing.
Well, I'm sorry about my face. I want her
Oh
face to
no,
be
y'all
our
are
brand.
beautiful.
I want her face to be our brand. So, but Dan will, whenever we put this out on Spotify and iTunes and of course YouTube, we will definitely have your tags in there.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I do have my own podcast. Of course, I hadn't done it in a long time, but recently I did do a podcast. I played 5 of my songs and described what they mean and why they're important to me and
Okay.
what I want to raise about sleep awareness. So I called it the Napcast. And
That's
like, yeah,
great. The
That's awesome.
Napcast. I like that.
Yeah, 'cause-
You're really good at these
Thanks.
quibs, by the way.
I
So,
am. Thank
so
you.
far since we've been here, just the titles of the songs and stuff, that's a
Thank
a
you.
talent. And now we're putting it out
Thank
there in
you.
the air. Make sure that you own all that.
Yeah.
I'm just
I do. A shout out to Make It is the app that I use, and
yeah.
anybody can sing on the app for free, and they send it to iTunes for free.
Oh, very
and
cool.
I've been like the in the top 10 for about a year now on the site.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So my music friends, they're like, we're definitely tuning into this podcast,
Cool.
because they just, everybody with narcolepsy, I call them my sleepy peeps.
Mm-hmm.
But in the music world, they all just call me sleepy.
Yeah.
They
I
go,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like sleepy.
Yeah.
And some of my songs are like, it took Sleepy American to wake some of us up about.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is that you're right. She's very quick with the words and very creative. One of the things that recent literature has been demonstrating is the specific study of individuals with narcolepsy, and has been demonstrating, reproducing the fact that they tend to be more creative than individuals without narcolepsy.
Definitely.
And so one of the things that kind of raises the question is the creativity coming from the fact that they have such vivid experiences with dreams and kind of intertwining with all of their day, and they can do kind of like lucid dreaming, like make themselves actually dream. But when you actually look at some of the learning literature just in general, there's differential contributions based on which stage of sleep you're in. And so many times we're talking about learning in the capacity of like 1 + 1 is 2. I'm reading a book, I can recall it. Or learning of I learned how to play basketball and I dribble a ball, and I did that like repeatedly.
Right.
And so what has historically kind of been suggested is that non-REM 2, non-REM 3 sleep tends to be very influential in that declarative learning. 1 + 1 is 2. I can get to that. Where REM sleep may be more influential in that non-declarative, like so those motor type of activities. However, it's also really important in creative processing. And so the question becomes, is this actually a gift that they have because of their narcolepsy, because of so much of this REM dissociation? Now, with that stated, because of the REM dissociation and the burden of the symptoms that they're experiencing, someone like Rachel is on a variety of different medications. And the medications that she's on are selectively utilized because of their different ways that they work, right? So when we're trying to treat disorders, we generally are looking at something called the mechanism of action, meaning that this is the proposed way or the demonstrated way of how a drug functions in the body. And so when you look at some of the landscape of the medications being utilized, which she's already referenced, Wakix, modafinil, and Xywav, which is low sodium oxybate, these are 3 very, very unique medications. And the reason I want to just review these is because I'm hoping that there are other people who have narcolepsy who are tuning in and hearing about how you're not only surviving, you're thriving. And
I don't know if I'm thriving.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, I bet I look a lot happier now.
I think you do.
I am.
But with those medications, when you have something like the oxybate medications, the main component of it that is active is something called gamma hydroxybutyrate. Gamma hydroxybutyrate is actually something that is what we call a precursor and a metabolite of a neurotransmitter brain called GABA, meaning that it is something that helps make GABA, but it's also part of the breakdown of GABA. GABA is super important in terms of sleep. Now, one of the things that the pharmaceutical company can't state because the FDA would smack their hand, but I can state because I'm a clinical provider and researcher, is that when we look at the use of oxybate medications, the class in general, and we apply it to someone for sleep, it helps them to fall asleep, right? But then we also see it helps in consolidating the sleep. So they actually have more consistent sleep. Remembering disturbed nocturnal sleep is a major problem. So it actually is therapeutic for disturbed nocturnal sleep, but it also helps in actually changing the architecture of sleep. And we see that it greatly enhances the amount of slow wave sleep someone is in. So that deep restorative stage of sleep. When it does that, it also reduces the amount of REM sleep they're in. And so therefore helps with the sleep paralysis, the sleep-related hallucinations, the nightmare disorder. So it really is more comprehensive. The fascinating part about this medication is that it generally has a short half-life. Now, with the Xywav, it's a twice nightly typically. Half-life is about 30 minutes out of your system in five hours. So most people need 2 doses. There's a once nightly available. And so that doesn't have a short of half-life, but is out of your system within 8 hours. And that's sodium oxybate. Now, when looking at that, it's both of these are out of your system by the time you wake up. The drug is indicated for excessive daytime sleepiness, cataplexy. Both of them are daytime symptoms. So the drug is out of your system, but it's affecting your daytime, right?
Gotcha.
And so what animal models have suggested as the reason why that's able to happen is it actually stabilizes what we call thalamocortical neurons. So basically deep in our brain is our thalamus, projections throughout the cortex. And so it helps in stabilizing our serotonin, norepinephrine, dopaminergic neurons, which are major contributors to wakefulness, but also stabilizing that cataplexy. So this is like a one-hit wonder. You are able to actually get at all of these different symptoms with just one drug. However, despite that, patients typically, as Rachel is describing, need these other treatments. When you look at the other treatments she's on, modafinil, working on the dopamine system, help in waking an individual, may also help with some focus and attention. It is used off-label in ADHD as well.
Very much used.
And then Wakix is novel, and this is the drug that I always say is the utility player in narcolepsy, and can be used in idiopathic hypersomnia off-label as well. They just had a clinical trial that unfortunately it didn't meet the endpoints due to the study design, but definitely directionality demonstrated significant or I can't say significant because statistically it wasn't significant, but demonstrated very, very robust improvements in symptoms of idiopathic hypersomnia. Now, why is it so novel? It works on the histamine system. It's the only drug that we have that works on the histamine system. Now, because of that, it makes a great utility player, meaning I can add it to any regimen and it works complementary. And so when I look at the regimen that Rachel's describing, is that we now are able to hit the same disease through all these different mechanisms.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, it's still not getting at the orexin. Right? Now, the good news is what's on the horizon?
Yes.
Orexin agonists, right?
Yes.
And we see so many companies, Takeda, Alkermes, Jazz Pharmaceuticals, ASI, all these companies.
Shout out to Dr. Swick. He
Yes.
was my doctor for a short while until he got hired there, and he left, and his fellow saw me a few months, and then I was looking for a sleep doctor in the area, and Doctometer, she referred me to my former doctor, and
and Dr. Swick is definitely a major contributor to understanding the orexin medications, and
many meetings with him out of Houston, Texas, and some fellows and stuff that we worked with him when we were at Phillips.
Yeah,
it's
Houston,
awesome.
Texas.
I can't thank y'all enough.
Yeah, you don't need to thank me just yet, and I'll tell you why. Because I did some digging before, and I love that you're on LinkedIn. So a lot of our audience, like we talk about the TikTok. See, I said the TikTok like I'm old.
the TikTok.
Yeah,
Them young whippersnappers in that TikTok,
Facebook.
the TikTok, the Facebook, the Instagram.
What I appreciate is LinkedIn. So for me, who's about to turn 50, I love LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. And so I love that you just did an animation cartoon about it. I just love following you. So what I think you bring to a lot of this awareness and as an advocate is huge. I've been in the sleep world for a little bit and learned some things all the time, especially from Ann, but even from you. So it's more of a thank you. Maybe we give you this platform and I'm part of it with a team of people, especially Handsome Dan. But
love the beard.
But the thank you is definitely, one way. So I really do appreciate it. If someone were to go just Google Sleepy American, I'm just saying they would be able to find you easy.
Of course.
Okay.
I've been Sleepy American since 2009.
Yeah. Sounds like you've been a Sleepy American before then. I see what I did there.
Yeah, I was.
Nothing.
Well,
Little light.
But I just started like when there was like the Avengers and they had a movie coming out, and there was a little conspiracy. Well, a little I guess it was like a little riff. I'm sorry, but yeah, they I'm sorry, I forgot.
No,
it's
you don't
okay.
have to.
No worries.
You know what? I do that
apologize.
too, and you don't have to apologize. So my point was that you've taken on this character of Sleepy American, who is a superwoman.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about it earlier in the podcast.
Thank
I
you.
agree. I think that, and maybe this is where you're going. I have no idea, but I do like that you've taken on that avatar and that character.
Thank you.
And then watching your videos when you're wearing your uniform, that's
you.
why I would love for our audience to go check it out.
Oh,
Because
that would mean the world to me because
you really bring a face. You bring
A great story.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
But it's important for people to know what it's truly like.
I also have complex sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that I had it until Mayo Clinic. But that's why the CPAP that wasn't working good enough because it was like it was breathing against me.
Sure.
But when I did 2 sleep studies with Dr. Sibler and the spinal tap and I definitely do have narcolepsy. I don't really without the Xywave. I just lay down and stare at the ceiling most of the time. It's a miserable experience, but it makes you appreciate free will movement and the ability. I'm so grateful to I've been on Xyrem since 2005. Dr. Becker, eventually he agreed that the FX or XR wasn't cutting it. But
Well,
yeah,
any SSRI and
he,
you know.
my Dr. Becker and Dr. Swick were like really good best friends. And that meant a lot to me because I just absolutely adored them because they were so warm and friendly and just like Anne. But I really think that Dr. Morse is like a standout physician. And she really, you watch her TikToks and she does care. She cares deeply.
Oh, I know. So
and she's passionate.
I'm
and
very blessed.
I commend
know
you
her.
for your deep empathy and your wealth of knowledge. I like how you say you're my health partner. I mean, it's you realize that life isn't fair. When this disorder comes on, your whole life does change. You have to reevaluate what am I going to do with my life, and you have to like feel like a loser a lot.
Yeah.
But like I was having cataplexy so much that they told me that I probably could never be a clinical psychologist because of potential dangerous clients.
Sure.
And I was advised to not do it. And then I was worried about the EDS and everything. And it's been a long journey. And I remember my first Narcolepsy Network conference was in 2006 here in Dallas. Very interesting fact is that I worked with Marguerite Utley, and she wrote Narcolepsy, a funny disorder that's no laughing matter. And that's the memoir that was out before Julie Flygar's Wide Awake and Dreaming. Yeah. And she and I actually are, me and Marguerite Utley, our hometown is Duncanville, Texas. When I was a teenager before narcolepsy, she and her husband lived like right around the corner. So I found that really prophetic that this rock star with narcolepsy, Marguerite Utley, and her husband just took good care of her. She took so much pride in being a representative for Dallas and Texas. And yeah, it was I really liked her, and I think it's a small world. It's just like, I think it's special that we all have different challenges to go through in life. And I think the most important thing in life is compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
If you're not going to, we do need the doctors to listen to us. I like how Dr. Ann goes through, like, if you had cataplexy, it's really, you have narcolepsy. And that's what made me, it's like, realize that I had narcolepsy. By December, I knew it was narcolepsy because my grandma, who passed away, I think she had narcolepsy too. But she told me it sounds like narcolepsy. Look it up, all the symptoms. And I was just shocked to find out that falling down thing was called cataplexy. And I'm like, I experience it all the time. And it doesn't really come with any other disorder. And I have the full tetrad. So I came in, because of my degree or my college, I already knew about schizophrenia and all the differences between the psychiatric disorders and how the hallucinations differ with me. But I really commend the compassionate component.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to know that although there's limitations that Rachel's experiencing with her narcolepsy, she is still successfully navigating being a wife, being a mother, being an awesome daughter. And she is
Thank you.
also reaching so many people on a daily basis using her voice and her music to spread awareness, improve education, and hopefully for other people to have the time to diagnosis that she did. I mean, recognizing the average time to diagnosis
That's
for people
why we do it.
is 8 to 10 years. And
Wow.
for her to have the wherewithal to know what narcolepsy looks like because of her background, she now is creating that opportunity for
I
other
agree.
people
Right.
to know what narcolepsy looks like
Yeah. and
so that they can be
that's right.
diagnosed sooner.
Yeah. 8 to 10 years.
Yes, it's sleep medicine is not as big of a priority as it needs to be because it affects every part. But because I've had this disorder for a long time, I've seen the progress. I mean, it was an unsuccessful study. I think there's a Dr. Siegel, but he had spoken at the Narcolepsy Network in Dallas about the nasal spray hypercretin and how it only lasted for like an hour and a half in animals or in humans too. But it was unfeasible because it's very short acting. So they're trying to find other ways to get hypercretin into the system. This, narcolepsy is basically the sleep diabetes. It's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
And it affects everything. That's why as my superhero avatar character, my superpower is called the empathizer. And I say that because
No, I love that.
empathize sounds like a good kick-ass verb. So I empathize, touch someone and they can temporarily experience everything I had. And it would be a lot easier because I could just touch Dr. Ann and she would know exactly what it's like to be in the skin and the amount of courage it takes to keep on living every day.
Great
and
word.
to have hope. And I want other people with narcolepsy and sleep disorders to know that I'm here for you. I've been online with narcolepsy support groups since 2006 on MySpace. And I've met
Throwback.
Hold on one
on
second.
MySpace.
Dan, MySpace was the beginning. Okay, thank you. So Rachel, we're coming up to the end of the podcast already. Can you believe that?
Wow.
We've already. I know time flies. And so normally we ask some questions.
We can. I wouldn't do the bunk bed one.
Okay. I was curious how we're going to do this. So I'll just come up with some fun stuff. But so before we end, we're going to ask some questions, and then I want to give a single shot of you to give one last message out there to our audience. So I'll just start off first. You had mentioned an ex-husband. You had mentioned a wife. You had mentioned them. So are you a cuddler or are you a non-cuddler when you sleep with somebody?
I tend to sleep like on my back on my wedge pillow, but sometimes sometimes my husband wants to he's real sweet, like spooning.
So are you a big spoon or a little spoon?
I like to sleep on my back alone. I do. You know, I'm on a slope.
Yeah.
It helps improve the breathing.
Hey,
Yeah.
I have a sleep bed. We're running out of time. I tell you about my bedtime routine.
Too funny.
Okay, so whenever you wear socks and shoes, are you a sock, shoe, or are you a sock, shoe?
So let me explain.
Yes,
Because most people need an explanation.
they do.
When you're putting your socks and shoes on, do you put both socks on first and then your shoes, or do you do it one at a time?
I don't wear socks.
Even better.
Like-
Even better.
I love it. Yeah, I'm not a well.
I know these aren't fancy like your shoes, but
Oh, they're fancy. They're
So
sparkly. It's pretty.
I do. So there's a big kind of joke because if you've seen my social, knocking
Knock
those
your
socks
off.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I never wear socks, but I wear boots with my suit. So
That's
obviously
awesome.
I do wear socks.
I bet
so
that
too.
looks really, really like killer.
Oh, well, thank you. You are amazing.
Thank you.
So this camera right here, what would you like our audience to know about narcolepsy and how can they be helpful?
Well, narcolepsy does affect every part of life, and I truly just want people to know that you're not alone, and that you really are a superhero because you have to deal with so many obstacles, and it isn't fair, but it comforts me to have people online and to have that connection, unable to drive. I think it's very important to change. This goes along with Julie's mission, but I'm just doing it in music, is the best way to change stigma is by changing pop culture. Because if you can make everyone aware that narcolepsy isn't, and nobody laughs at us anymore. When I say I have narcolepsy, they ask, "Well, what's that like?" And like you know, and I you know, and less over the years that they would. We've worked on reducing stigma so much that it's no longer taboo as much to have narcolepsy. But the reason why I sing about it is because like sometimes artists like Third Eye Blind, who probably does have narcolepsy, Stephen Jenkins, he isn't speaking about the narcolepsy he has. I think that some people are private. I do have a first cousin who's become a painter. She used to be a pharmacist, but she got narcolepsy at the age of 38, which was after I got it. And she's 8 years older than me. But she had to redefine her life. And I almost saw her again in Minnesota during the sleep study, but I had to get a second sleep study and she got a cold. But I just want people to know that listen to my music. Some of the words, the lyrics mean so much to me. When I talk about narcolepsy and sleep, I'm literally like singing like it is, like what it really does, and it tears at you. I think the most important thing to do is to do your best, take care of you, stay positive. Listen to your sleep doctor, let them know how it's working, and do your best just to kick ass every day. Knock some socks off.
There you go.
Oh, that reminds me. Go Rangers!
There you go. So I cannot thank you enough for being here. You're amazing.
Thank
To our audience at Sleepy American, please follow her on all social medias.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Ann, would you like to end it?
I am incredibly thankful for Rachel to be here. It is a privilege to be a part of her wellness journey, but it also is a privilege to be a part of here today and getting to hear you share your message more broadly.
Yeah, we're definitely friends.
Yes.
I think we're a little bit more than sleep friends. She knows a lot about me.
That's a good thing. Well, thank you so much for sleeping
no
around
problem.
with Dr. Ann and Matthew. I really do appreciate you being here.
Oh, I appreciate it too.
We're just keeping it between sleep friends.
We are.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sleep friends.